All right. Welcome, any listeners we may have, people that know us, people that don't know us. This is our first and initial recording of a podcast between two coaches, athletes, friends. We are two people who met just a couple months ago. My name is Gunnar Regan, and my partner here is Andrew Swasey. I'm going to pass it to Andrew. He's going to fill you in on what his life has looked like up to this point, get the snippets, get the highlights, and then we'll pass it back and forth.
Hey everyone, Andrew Swasey here with Gunnar. A little bit about myself. Currently, I operate a personal training studio out of San Diego, California. I opened up my studio in January of 2020. I've been a certified personal trainer for a little over 10 years now, coming up on 11 in November. And that whole journey started when I was 19 years old. Growing up, I played many youth sports, rec sports, and competitive sports, primarily football and baseball. Football was my primary passion, and I played it for almost a decade, from about the age of 8 to about the age of 18. And I was on a mission at the time after graduating high school to find a career, as well as, some kind of semblance as far as what I'm going to do with football as well, because I still had a passion for it after graduating high school and wanted to play in college. And when I first started going to school, I initially went as a firefighter, and I was studying fire science. And after about 3 or 4 months, I realized that the fire science career wasn't for me. I knew I wanted to have a job where I wasn't going to sit at a desk all day long, although the stress and the demands and the real uncertainty of whether or not you could get a good paying job as a firefighter in Southern California was a little bit too much for me to really dive into and invest all that time into, with not knowing what would come out of it. So in the process of still wanting to work a job or have a career that didn't bind me to a desk, I decided to follow my passion, which was working out and playing sports. And I became a certified personal trainer when I was 19 years old. Part of that decision came when I was going to a community college here in San Diego. I was training, doing spring football with the community college football team, and I ended up injuring myself during that period of time. And then the decision I had to make was, do I continue to go to school and play football, almost like a full-time job, or do I continue to go to school and actually get a job and start working? And I chose the latter and decided to become a certified personal trainer and really pursue a career in fitness and health, primarily motivated by selfish reasons around my desire to do something fit and active. Over the course of the past decade, I've had so many experiences in the fitness world. I started off working at like a YMCA, like most trainers, either at your big box gyms, and you get your reps in there and your experience in there. And through that process, we talk a lot about our language, right, and the things that we do want versus the things that we don't want. And through that process, I learned a lot about what I don't want, as far as like eventually having a successful career in personal training, watching supervisors or other trainers do things differently, learning from that experience, and then realizing, okay, in the future I'm going to open up a studio and things are going to look a lot different from what I'm currently seeing and how the gym or the place that I'm currently working at is currently operating. So there was a lot of time in between getting certified as a personal trainer and to where I'm at today. During that process, I found my new competitive outlet, and that was Olympic weightlifting. It was the perfect thing for me to do after quitting football and choosing to work a career in the fitness industry, because it still allowed me to scratch that competitive itch. And I could train and I could compete in the same place that I was working at. So it was very simple for me. And the notion of lifting weights was very similar to football, because in football I played a linebacker, and one of the things I love to do is hit people and tackle people. So lifting weights and with that kind of aggression and intensity was something that I really enjoyed. And through that process, I also had a business that I started that ran in conjunction with weightlifting. And through that experience of running a business and eventually having an unsuccessful business as far as finances go and longevity, there was so much that I learned through that process. And, you know, to fast forward a little bit without getting too caught up in that period of my life, it was a big learning experience for me. When you grow up playing sports, you're pretty good at sports, and you develop a level of confidence that is comes from external validation, right? I can lift this amount of weight, or I can make this many, or I can make these kind of plays in football or whatever. And I noticed that same attitude was what was carried over into my business. And that was a really, really harsh and brutal reality, to invest money, time, as well as like relationships, the people that were involved in that business with me, and to get to a point where it ended up being really unsuccessful. And just, you know, it was demoralizing. It was tough. And that was a big, big turning point for me in my life, really, as well as my training career. I dedicated all this time, almost 4 years, to competing in Olympic weightlifting. I put a lot of my time and savings into a business that didn't end up really panning out. And I had to ask myself, what am I doing? Like, where are things going? I felt as if I was just jumping from one shiny object to the next. And through the process of being humbled a bit financially, as well as personally, in the sense that you realize that your ego might have been a little bit too inflated, I ended up kind of just coming back down. I ended up taking a break from weightlifting for a bit, and I took some time to reflect and really decide what was really important to me. And through that process, I realized that when I first started training, I had a huge overarching goal of eventually opening up my own studio. And that was something that, you know, 5 or 6 years into training, I hadn't quite accomplished yet. And I decided to, after the whole experience, to dedicate myself to building my business back up and eventually getting to a point where I can open up my own studio, which I'm now sitting in right now. Going through that process was tough. It required me to, once again, put my ego in check a little bit, you know, living with family for a bit to get back on your feet, you know, taking a hit in terms of my business, and eventually growing the clientele base that I had and getting it to the point where it's at now was a big uphill struggle, but it was all worth it. And it was all part of that journey that has got me to where I'm at today. Through that process, I really rekindled a love and a joy for reading and educating myself and learning, and not in the formal sense, but more so in the sense of, you know, reading books on a regular basis, things that are focused more so around personal development, financial intelligence, things along those lines, things that when I started my first business, I really had little to no knowledge of. And through that process of, you know, eventually starting to save money again, build up my client base back up again, I was able to get to a point where I was finally able to make the leap from doing what I was doing, which was mobile personal training, working with people out of their homes, to the point where I'm now able to rent out a studio with the clients that I have, put all my equipment in there, and run a business from there right out the gate. And that's what I was able to do in December of 2019. I had a soft opening for my studio, and my clients that I was currently working with, they came in, we started training in here. And then I had my grand opening in January of 2020 for my studio. And unless you've been living underneath a rock for a while, you might be aware of what happened a couple months down the road. Once again, more adversity I had to face. And that adversity was COVID-19 and the lockdowns that were going on in all of America, and especially in California. Lots of gyms and fitness facilities basically had to shut their doors and really fend for themselves to start. And there was a good 2-month period where no one was training in my studio. And this was something that I just started off. And it was a period of time that was really challenging for me. But in those moments, I was able to reflect on what I had gone through previously with another business. And I knew through that experience I had with the previous business, I was in a position where I could survive what was going on. I had taken the necessary precautions to build up a reserve to make sure I wasn't over leveraging myself and put my business in a good position where I had clients that I was already working with and I wasn't starting from the ground up. And so eventually, a couple months later, I was able to start operating again in a way where people felt safe coming into my studio. And I've been able to operate like that ever since. Through that process of reopening up my studio and getting my business back on its feet after being locked down, I realized that like a level of humility took over myself. And I realized that even though I've learned from my past mistakes and I've grown to get to this point where I'm at with my business and having a storefront location, the fun has just begun, or the hard part has really just begun as far as me growing and evolving as a person, as well as my business too, and growing and evolving that. And through that realization, I knew that I needed to seek out coaching and people who were further down the road than I was, who had experience doing the things that I was doing. And that's when I decided to sign up for the Strong Coach and go through a 90-day program. And the 90-day program was great. It was everything that I needed to feel confident in my business, as well as make the strides necessary in my personal development to get me to where I'm at today. Whereas, a couple weeks into the month of June here in California, and my business is growing and thriving again. I'm getting ready I'm facing the next hurdle in my business, which is, growing outside of myself and hiring employees and expanding my business into something bigger than just me. And really going through the 90-day program with Strong Coaches. First off, I met Gunnar, who I'm on the call with today. And second off, developed the wherewithal and the ability to really see and create a vision for something bigger with my business. And that was a great process. And through that process, my business has been able to grow. And I feel like I've been able to, even more so, I've been able to grow as a person. I would be lying if I said that the or my business growth was not directly connected to my personal growth. And that personal growth was significantly grown through the Strong Coach program, as well as like working with Gunnar, who was my mentor through the program, and having great conversations with him throughout that process. And that is really what has gotten me to where I'm at nowadays, working my studio. And as a professional, I'm always looking to evolve and grow, and even personally evolve and grow, and to get to a point now where I have another opportunity directly in front of me to grow and evolve my business by bringing on an employee, and even grow and evolve by doing something fun like this, doing a podcast. So that's really my backstory as far as where I'm at. I'm going to throw the ball over to you, Gunnar, and let you share your background and your story.
Right on. Thank you, Andrew. That's a good start. I think it's important to know where you've come from to give yourself a base to where you're going. So to start off, I grew up in Minnesota, about 30 minutes or so outside of the Twin Cities. And I had the option and the ability to go out every day of the week as a kid and play a different sport with my neighbors, and uh, in all those moments of competition and experience and learning about myself, it really set the groundwork for where I would go, both in school, both socially, and athletically. So growing up, I played as many sports as I could, and I found a very strong taking to hockey, so ice hockey, and played all the way through high school and 2 years of college hockey. And in that process, I had always wanted to be the strongest and the fittest player on the team, because I knew if I was ready to go at any moment, I was going to help the team succeed. And that really stood out for me in hockey. So having the opportunity to play 4 years of varsity for a really good school and then moving on to play college hockey, that was my underlying driver. So I always wanted to be ready. I always wanted to be strong. I always wanted to be as athletic and fit as I could be. And unfortunately, at the time when I went to college, that was not the MO for the rest of my teammates. So playing my first year of college, I was 18 years old on a team with all the other incoming freshmen as 21-year-olds. And my lifestyle and my life drive was slightly different than the rest of them. So I found myself, instead of going out after games, I would stay in the weight room and do lifts on myself, and um, always looking to build myself up and get better that way. There were moments of resentment and disgust with my teammates, and in reflection, I now understand I didn't like what I was doing for those reasons. And to this day, the best decision I ever made was to retire from hockey, knowing all the work that I was putting in off the ice was going to help me pursue something else, whether that was sport, career, socially, and emotionally. So I retired from college hockey in 2015. At that point, I had already been working in a gym, putting in floors, cleaning bathrooms, doing anything I could do to also be a sponge and pick up as much stuff as I could from other coaches and in a training environment that I respected. And that turned out to be where I started my coaching career. So fall of 2014, spring of 2015, I was in a gym. I had just retired from hockey, and I immediately turned my competitive drive to be the best into a CrossFit career. So being a competitor in the CrossFit sport. So 2015 was a launching pad year for me. I started coaching. I started figuring out I was a good coach in the terms of I understood what it took to be good at whatever I wanted to do and how to relate that to other people for what they wanted to do. So started coaching 2015 in a gym in the Twin Cities, and actually stayed there for about 6 years and continued to learn about myself. And that eventually led me to wanting to learn even more about myself and become an even better coach. And that's where I found the Strong Coach program, um, which Andrew mentioned quickly. And in that process, it was a 12-week program. At week 5, I left my previous job to start my own coaching business. I moved across the country in week 6 with my significant other. And ever since last August, I've been on my own, creating what I want in terms of coaching, teaching people physical abilities and fitness, as well as now really branching into what it means to be a competitive athlete with a mindset that's going to help someone succeed anywhere in life. Um, so my coaching business is called Animus Coach. Andrew's is Swasey Fitness, I believe. And where we are today is not the destination. Negation acknowledged. So looking at this podcast, we are big fans of discussing topics that move us forward, that can give our clients an ability to be their best selves because we are working on ourselves on the front end. As Andrew also mentioned, the business development that he's had is directly related to his personal development. So where we're coming from for this podcast, we want to discuss topics that are about what we can do as individuals that are going to impact the people around us, whether that's clients, family, friends, people we've never met. Who knows? Maybe you're listening to this podcast for the first time, which it would also be our first time listening to it back. We want to give our experience as athletes, as coaches, as sons, as significant others in terms of how we can be our best self. So without further ado, thank you for listening to our intros. Our first topic is strength. What does strength mean to you, Andrew?
Strength. What does strength mean to me? Well, strength, as we discussed earlier, is it's kind of like a quality, right? It's something that is most people think of it in the sense of like the physical realm, right? This guy can squat this much weight, or this girl can press that much weight, therefore they're strong, right? But even as like strength professionals, we know there's levels within that. There's like absolute strength and relative strength, right? Absolute strength being doesn't matter how much you weigh, like how much can you lift. Relative strength being how much you can lift relative to your body weight. Strength is also it's an adaptation that occurs over time, right? And that that definition of it, or at least that explanation of it, can be applied more so in the physical sense as well as the mental and spiritual sense as well. So what does strength mean to me? Such an open-ended question. That could really go so many ways. But the way I'll take it is strength is the product of experience, really. Like strength, of course, there's like some people have natural physical strength, but if we're talking more abstractly here, in the sense that like strength is something that occurs as you've done something for a period of time, you have experience with it. And another word that we've used in our conversation is confidence, right? So strength or confidence tends to be, or strength and confidence go hand in hand together in a way where, not in like a, negation acknowledged, not in a irrational way where, I'm just going to be, say I'm confident, therefore I am confident. It's a confidence that comes like deep from within. It's a confidence that only comes through the experience. Sorry, I'm right next to a road. But the experience of doing something and going into and applying it yourself, not just talking about it, right, in a theoretical way, but through the experience of sticking to a process, right? And in my mind, when I think of strength, that's like how I interpret it, in the way that strength is a byproduct of doing something consistently over a period of time and allowing you to develop a level of confidence that comes only from practice, not from the ego per se. So when I think of strength, that's where my mind goes. And There's a lot of like subtopics within that question, or like within that explanation, that we can dive into a little bit deeper. I'd be curious to hear, Gunnar, like what are your thoughts along strength as well? Maybe there's some distinctions from what I just said, or some similarities, or something completely different.
Thank you. Yeah. So strength to me is the capacity to withstand stress. Stress is everywhere. The world we live in is feeding off of stress. Some people are winning, some people are losing. And the more we can train, the greater our capacity is to withstand stress. As a strength and conditioning coach, I completely recognize the number of reps that someone would have to do to gain physical strength, right? Like we're going to have tangible results where muscles are growing. We can push more weight, as Andrew mentioned, and those are all very valuable things. What I'm really interested in understanding is, how does the work we put in physically translate to the mental side of being strong? So things that come to mind right away are, if I have the capacity to withstand stress because I've put in physical reps over and over and over again, one, I'm going to become durable. I'm going to have durability that lasts far longer than if I was not to train. And understanding that the more time I put in on myself, the better I can actually serve others. So that durability, I can take things, I can give myself space to respond rather than reacting out of fear, right? Or stress, if we're going back to that. And in that process, the more that I train my body and my mind, the more dependable I should become, right? If I'm doing the reps in the gym to make myself better in any sense of the name, I'm going to be dependable to someone, and it should be to myself first, so then I can be dependable to other people. So durability, dependability all fall into that capacity to withstand stress. And
it's interesting. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you mentioned the strength gives you the capacity to endure, right? And this is another quality, right? That, especially in the strength and conditioning world, that's a word that we use around strength and endurance, right? But like, is endurance possible without strength? Do you think the ability to endure is, like, based off what you're saying, is that something that you can do? Like, is like a prerequisite level of strength necessary to have that level of endurance?
Yeah, yes and no. Yes, the strength is necessary to have endurance in the physical sense. If I'm going to move for many, many hours at a certain intensity, I'm going to have a need for a level of strength, right? My body will break down if I'm not strong enough, right? So there is a need for the physical strength, physical power, physical training to get there. On the mental side, I like to think of like playing chess, right? That's typically a battle of attrition, right? I'm trying to make moves to outweight someone else's endurance, right? I'm trying to set myself up with the right mentality and right psychological moves to have endurance or to show endurance. That might not be physical strength. However, the reps that you do practicing anything, training for something, gives you strength. So yes to both. no to them together. I think they are their own things.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
Uh,
Thanks for explaining that to me. I was
yeah.
curious. Yeah.
How do you view stress and strength? Does it help? Does it hurt?
Like stress and its relationship to strength.
Yeah, what does handling stress mean to you? Like, does it help to be stronger? Does it hurt to be stronger?
Well, I guess we can just come back, take a step back from my question for a second and define what stress is. In the physical sense, or I mean, I guess in terms of a physiological sense, I interpret stress as, it can be, our body can handle stress in many different ways. Like many times we think of like stress at work or, um, like stress from the workouts that we did. But like, how does your question was how does like strength and stress relate to each other? Like,
Yeah.
gotcha. Well, regardless of where the stress comes from, so like specifically defining stress as something that throws the body out of homeostasis. I think that would be a good way, like that I could define it or look at it, is that stress is anything that throws your body or your mind off of its state of neutrality or homeostasis, right? So you can have if this is neutral and then you have stress that goes, or you can experience stress over here, you can also experience recovery to the other side. So stress is really more about it's on a continuum or a spectrum. On one end is stress, one end is recovery, however you want to interpret recovery, right? So stress, like by itself in relation to strength, you can't just, in my mind, you can't just look at stress in an isolated form, right? So, but stress, so with that being said, stress in relation to strength, stress is like a necessary mechanism for evolution and growth, right? And that at the end of the day is what strength is. Strength is a byproduct of stress. We've placed a stress on the body, something that it wasn't used to. There's a period of time where it takes a little bit of recovery to adapt or to build back up from that stress. And then there, at the end of that, is a increase in strength, right? The byproduct of the stress and the adaptation is increase in strength, increased ability to handle more stress in the future, right? And you could say like being human beings and organisms, like that is like the fundamental, like in my mind, that kind of like makes me think of like the fundamental premise of evolution, right? We've evolved and become what we are today through the constant process of stresses being placed on our body, whether it's a physical stress like running away from a lion, or like maybe a chemical stress or energy stress or a mental stress, like all that stress comes into our body, and regardless of its form, we have to complement that stress with recovery and adaptation, or if it's mental stress, like a level of reflection where we can look at something, maybe look at a situation from a different perspective or lens and realize that, what I did in that specific situation might have not been the best for me, and I was under a stressful mental event. But in hindsight, when I'm out of the event, I can now look at it and grow and evolve from it, right? So stress and strength, the relationships to each other, you can't have one without the other. And I would even argue that recovery has to be somewhere in that conversation as well. And not just from the sense of working out and doing physical exercise, but you could even say it with work, right? Like how often do we come across clients who they sacrifice their physical body, or they sacrifice themselves for their jobs or their work, right? They work 50, 60-hour work weeks where that's all that they do. And it's not as much of a physiological stress as it is more of a mental and emotional stress that they have to take on. And a lot of the times, they're not making time for recovery. They're not making time to allow that intensity of the work to be matched with the recovery that's necessary to facilitate that lifestyle. And then when you see that stress and that recovery going out of imbalance, there's no longer strength involved. You actually lose strength. You lose capability when you don't balance the stress with recovery. Actually, that's where disease and other malfunctions functions, I guess, occur is when that stress and recovery are out of balance. So when I come back to the notion of stress and recovery and like what they mean to me, or stress, recovery, and strength and what they mean to me, they're really about this constant process of building, recovery, adapting, building, or like taking stress on, allowing for recovery, then adapting. And it's like the classic model in strength and conditioning, undulating, like, periodization, and I'm forgetting the term right now. Super compensation. That's the word. Yeah, super compensation. And that's how you get stronger in the gym. And in many ways, like we're still physiological organisms, right? That there's an expression, I forget who brought it up, the stress bucket, right? All of our stresses go into one bucket. There's only one spigot that we can turn to let that stress out and to decompress, right? That stress bucket can easily overflow if we don't address it. And that can lead to, basically the opposite of strength, which you could say is weakness over time when you don't allow for that recovery. So to finish off your question and talk about like what does stress and strength, like how do they relate to each other? I think they're really more so part of a bigger process that occurs, and there are different facets of that process, right? And like I said, like recovery has to be considered into that as well. And I mean, in many ways, we talk about the physical adaptations that occur with strength in that specific process right there of recovery, stress, and adaptation, and the adaptation being an increase in physical strength. And I also really view that same process in the mental realm as well. Like, coming back to that worker who works 60 hours a week, only has one day off, never has time to recover. Like on a mental level, they're not making gains. they're not making gains mentally. They're going to get burnt out. I mean, so many times we hear about like these people that they get to a point where they work so hard their entire life that they've made all this money, but then they end up spending all their money trying to get their health back, right? And it's very it's unfortunate. Is really what it is. So. But those are my thoughts on strength and strength and stress and recovery specifically. Do you have like any thoughts on that, or like anything that you want to elaborate in regards
to a follow-up question? So as a coach, what is your intention when using strength training for someone? Is it a way to increase their stress, or is it a way to disperse their stress?
So the question being, what is my strategy as a coach, my clients in regards to strength? Like can you reiterate that again for me one more time?
Yeah, as a coach, when you are training someone in the physical strength training, what's your intention with stress? Like what are you using stress for in that situation?
I get what you're saying now. So the stress being, let's say, dumbbells in this specific example, is being used to cause a physiological adaptation, increase in muscular strength and size, right? As well as the other benefits that come along with performing strength training. One of my philosophies as a coach is to meet clients where they're at, right? If you are not meeting, if a coach is unable to meet the client where they're at, they're really just guessing and most likely plugging them into a cookie cutter process, which is less likely to lead results because they might fit that cookie cutter process, but then they might not. And you don't know for sure until you go through the process of building rapport and assessing a client, seeing where their physical capabilities are at. Because if their physical capabilities are at one level and you're providing them with a program that's way it's far above it or far below it, you're not really meeting the map. And that's an important or extremely important process in the realm of strength training, because when we're talking about building physical strength for the client, they're at their current level, right? If you apply too much stress or too much adaptation, there's risk for injury, maybe decreased motivation to work out through excessive soreness or whatever the situation might be, depending on the individual client. And then at the same time, you might undershoot and you might provide too little stress or not enough stress to cause the physiological adaptation that they're looking for. So when it comes to clients and building strength, it starts with the process of meeting them where they're at. You have to go through this process of, you could say, assessment or information gathering, through repetitions as well. Sometimes there's only so many assessments you can do until you can see someone do ankle, knee, or hip assessment, right? But until they actually do a squat, you don't know how well they squat, right? So, I mean, you can obviously infer based off of how well those joints move, how good their squat will or won't be, but sometimes you got to get the repetitions in there too, and that situation, I would slightly undershoot and build up and try and find that threshold until you're like, okay, we've exceeded that threshold. We know we've applied enough physiological stress on your body to create adaptation. That's what I call the minimum effective dosage, or maybe possibly even the maximum effective dosage, right? And falling within that minimum and maximum effective dosage is where we want to be when we're trying to strategically apply a physiological stress on someone's body. You undershoot, you don't get enough stress, no adaptation. You overshoot, you get too much physiological stress, the body goes into shock, and maybe it's too sore the next day to train, or you risk potential injury, right? So in regards to working with my clients, it's very important that I go through that information gathering process, and we take time to ramp up rather than just going, all out with the gate. Very rarely would I ever do that. You're talking about coming with finely tuned athletes or someone who has a lot of experience and awareness with their body and has the ability to communicate that with you. And but rarely is that ever the case with the type of clientele that I'm working with. So, how about yourself?
Yeah, an interesting thing comes up when you mention where that stress level should be for an individual. I find the distinction there to be, first, as a trainer and a coach, we want to use more of the neurological aspect. Like when we gain strength, there's two ways, right? We have the neurological adaptation first. So that's our central nervous system, our peripheral nervous system working together to learn how to move. That can be extremely stressful. And that, to me, is capability, right? We're teaching the ability to move in a certain pattern that's going to be healthy and advantageous for a long time. And the distinction there is, as soon as we have those neurological gains, we're squatting well, we're deadlifting well, we're running better, we're jumping better. All of those pieces are in play because we have the connection to our mind, to our body. That's where capacity comes in. This is a different thing, right? If I have the capability to squat really well, let's say with a PVC over my head and an overhead squat, that does not mean I have the capacity to lift 440 pounds or 200 kilos from the ground. Right? I have to build that capacity, and that's where the physical or tensile strength comes into play. So having that understanding, like, all right, the stress that someone needs is variable every day, any day of the year. They should always have the capability. We want to teach that so it's a lasting thing. However, we're going to gain capacity over time. And just going back to the definition of strength that I had earlier, it's capacity to withstand stress. So within that, if we're moving poorly, we have poor capability, we will have less capacity in the long run, which might backfire and hurt us.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that. So I just wrote down in my notes, neurological gains before physiological gains, or like muscle gains, right? I think you hit it on the head. Or at least I heard you say something along the lines of before we are going to, or your capabilities are associated with your ability to move, right? Movement and capability, those are synonymous with each other. Capacity is more synonymous with the strength, the actual ability to express your fullest potential, right? And that's what's in strength, like in the physiological sense that we're talking about here. Strength is an expression of your capacity. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that also builds off that idea is I believe as a coach and an athlete that strength is always available to work on. So our capacity is always available to work on. However, it requires effort consistently to be strong.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I'm curious as far as, we have this conversation around strength goes, and you mentioned one of your beliefs there, and an opportunity to give our listeners a better understanding of who we are within, about the last 10 minutes of our conversation, because we do have to get off soon. I'm curious if you could list one of your primary values and beliefs. And we both have written down about 4 or 5 of these. Maybe we can list one of ours or one of our most important ones, and we can end with that. And then we can leave the listeners for the following episode to expand on the rest of our values and beliefs. How does that sound?
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah. So looking at the definitions and where I see myself in the world, the first value that comes up is integrity. And for me, integrity is all about the importance we put in our word, because words can help, words can hurt. The knife goes both ways a lot of times. And I believe the choice to speak clearly is always under my control. And that I want to use language to be present and tell my truth. And that's where integrity comes into. If I'm saying something that does not sit well with myself, I'm likely not going to do that. And that's out of integrity. So for me, integrity is number one. It goes many different ways: leadership, self-awareness, language, how I speak about myself, how I speak about others. My integrity is the number one value.
Yeah, that reminds me of this book I read, I don't know how long ago, like 3 or 4 years ago. It's called The 4 Agreements. Have you ever read that book?
I have not, but I'm familiar with it. I'm curious.
One of the agreements is to be impeccable with your word. And that's everything that you're saying right there. And you talk about integrity, and the word that came to mind, maybe you use this as well, is like alignment, right? And integrity, in your definition of it, strongly resembles what I would define as alignment, right? And when I know we both learned this in our coaching program, but you can't be in negation acknowledge, you can't be in integrity if you're living out of alignment, right? And that takes a level of awareness that someone must have about themselves, because to have alignment and integrity, you also have to have like a level of values and beliefs that support that integrity, that create almost like that structure, that creates a structure for you to have integrity. Because when we talk about integrity in a physical sense, integrity relates to structures, right? The integrity of a building, right? Integrity of a building is compromised with a faulty foundation, right? What is the foundation for having integrity or alignment? Like, those are our values and beliefs. And I think integrity, in my opinion, is one of the best like values, beliefs, maxims, whatever you want to call it, to start off with, because in many ways it creates the foundation for the rest of the values that you have. Because can't have the structure without that foundation, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And another piece that goes into that is if I'm wanting an outcome in my life, I want to speak positively about that because I want that positive outcome. If I am constantly negative and negating everything I say and I want a different outcome, they are out of alignment, right? The positives and the negatives are there for a reason. If I want a positive outcome, I should speak in a positive manner about myself, about the thing I want to achieve. And I should speak positively about that process to everyone that I come across.
For sure, 100%. That the first thing that comes to mind when I say that, it's like negative visualization versus positive visualization. And both of us as former athletes, we know the power of that. And I imagine that's why it was so easy for us to pick up that concept of negation versus the affirmation. Because at least when I was playing football, and one of the things I didn't even realize at the time growing up, at night when I'd have trouble falling asleep, I would close my eyes and I'd visualize myself playing football from my first person perspective, making the game winning touchdown catch, making the game saving tackle, making the plays that I would need to make to be that incredible athlete. And I didn't realize at the time, but that was how my actual play manifested. That, of course, I wasn't the best football player in San Diego County. I was fairly good, and part of it was through experience and physical strength. But the other aspect of the mental part, where I created like these big positive visual outcomes for myself, really created the neurological pathways for me to do it in the physical realm. And when it comes back to the language thing, it was very easy for me to pick up when I understood that concept in a more of a in the way that we're talking about it here, is that, oh yeah, if I want something to happen, I should visualize this thing happening in the way that I want it to happen. And if I place all my focus, my intention on the thing that I don't want to happen, then that's the thing that's most likely going to happen. And it also comes back to opportunities, right? Being both of us self-employed, working for ourselves, some level of entrepreneurship in there. You have to be able to spot opportunities. How do you spot opportunities? You spot opportunities when you have the mental space to see a positive outcome. How do I know I want to I can't find the right location for my gym if I've never visualized it myself. Like in negation, acknowledged in that statement right there. There's an expression, we always say it in our conversation the other week, as is above, so below. Was that what you said?
Yeah. As above, so below, as inside, as outside.
Exactly, right? So how can we see an external manifestation occur in our lives if we've never internalized it?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
That comes back to that language conversation there for sure. Any other thoughts on that specifically?
This is a self plug here. I teach this every week to my clients, is the way that we talk about what we want and knowing what we want, giving that space to all of those thoughts is going to allow you to make progress towards what you want faster. So what you touched on there is, sitting in bed at night, trying to fall asleep and seeing the reps, right? Those are reps that you're putting in. That is a practice that can be done. It takes work, right? It takes effort to get there, to have those visualizations, to be able to see the play that you want, to be able to feel the emotions, the sensations equated to them. So as a coach, that's what I am doing every week, multiple times a week, is creating the visualization space to see what you want, whether that's a play on the ice, whether that's an outcome, whether that's a new relationship to a certain movement. Maybe you've always had trouble with the clean and jerk, and you tell yourself you have trouble with the clean and jerk. Guess what? Your thoughts direct what's going to happen next. So being able to give yourself that space, make distinctions, and then come back at it with a positive visualization, a positive language around what you want to do is vital to being strong. To come back to where we came into this, if you tell yourself you're never going to be strong, you're right.
Yeah. What's that like famous like Henry Ford quote? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And that's a little more cliche, but it was it's definitely, I understand 100% what you're saying. And even though that was a shameless plug, that's totally fine because you're a fucking world-class coach, and that's what world-class coaches do. So no shame in that. I am getting close on my time here for what I could spend for our call today. I am really looking forward to continuing this conversation next week, though. Anything that you want to finish off with, Gunnar, before we get off our call today?
Just want to say thank you for listening to this point. We are hoping to give you as much of our takes on things as possible because we are currently in the process of putting the reps in. So when we do the reps outside of these calls, we're learning about ourselves. We're creating self-awareness. And in that, we hope to be very mindful coaches. So if you're interested in coaching, my business is Animus Coach. You can find it on Instagram. I have all my contact information there as well. And, just to send off, my name is Gunnar Regan, and I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I want to basically say everything that Gunnar just said there. Super thankful for everyone that has gotten to this point in our conversation and stuck through it. Myself, I'm located in San Diego, California. If you're looking for a training studio in person, like to work with a coach like myself, my business is called Swasey Fitness. I am also on Instagram as well, Swasey_fitness. You can reach out to me through there. You can also just Google search Swasey Fitness. It'll be the first thing that pops up, and all my contact information is on there as well. So, yeah, great conversation today, Gunnar. I look forward to next week's call as well.
All right. Likewise. Thanks, everybody.